Well, hey, Dave Tovey, awesome. Thanks for joining us. All right, let's get the meeting started. Welcome everybody to the Native CDFI Network's weekly call. This is actually this is the 24th episode. I meant to update this, but so we've been doing a bunch of these, and I've got to say thanks to all our stalwarts that have been tuning in. I feel like we've grown a bit together, even though we've been apart this whole time. So thanks for joining us. I'm really excited about our guest today. Our guest today is Fatima Abbas, and she's the Director of Policy and Legislative Council, the National Congress of American Indians. And we invited her because now is a timely time to get in touch with NCAI for a few different reasons that we'll get into. We also wanted to recap from our meeting the last week and put together some plans for moving forward. But before we get moving forward, a couple of things. First, just want to reiterate why we're here, and that's to share across the country, is to learn across the country and really connect our members across the country, as NCN is the only organization for Native CDFIs run by Native CDFIs, and we want to make sure that we're responsive and listening to you all. So with that background, I want to see if our board chairman, Pete Upton, has any opening words. And you might be on mute, Pete. All right, so we're having some trouble there, so we'll check back in with Pete in a little bit. But here's an overview of our agenda today. First, we're going to hear from our guest, Fatima. And then after that, we'll provide some updates and some other news. And then we want to get into the second part of our meeting today is kind of recap of what we did last week and get some feedback from our members and talk about next steps and how we can continue to keep this momentum moving forward. And with that, I'd like to introduce Fatima. So Fatima is Holly Wasaponi, and she serves as the policy. She serves as policy director and legislative counsel for the National Congress of American Indians, where she supervises a policy team, and she's also worked in-house for a few tribes, and she's well educated from Philadelphia, and is a graduate of the UC Berkeley School of Law. And just a bit more background about Fatima. Fatima's really on the front lines of every single economic development policy that runs through NCAI. And right now we thought this was really pertinent time because of the upcoming election. We talked a bit at our last meeting we had before our summit about some policy priorities for NCAI. We want to make sure that they're on their radar. And also NCAI has been really strong in echoing and signing on to our letters. They signed on to some of our letters around the PPP. They've signed on to our ask of $30 million for the NACA appropriations, and they're here to listen. And they also have a process for making that sign on easier. And so she's going to talk a bit about that. But and I guess not only that, so Fatima also staffs the Treasury Department's Tribal Advisory Council, I want to say. And so active both on the federal side as well as the congressional side. So Fatima, thanks for joining us. And can you tell us a bit about yourself and
Sure.
what NCI has been up to recently?
Sure, and can you all hear me? I'm gonna do a mic check first because I frequently start talking and have microphone issues. Can you hear me, Jackson?
Perfect, yep.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for that very kind introduction, and hello, everyone. As Jackson mentioned, I currently at NCAI serve as policy director and legislative counsel in our government relations department. And I supervise our entire government relations team, which has been growing since COVID. We're about at 8 members right now. I specifically cover a variety of economic development issues, from taxation to small business development. And we do have a new policy analyst who will also start to do work in that portfolio, and I'll make sure I introduce you to her. Her name is Julia Wakeford, and she came over from the National Council of Urban Indian Health. Before NCAI, like Jackson mentioned, I was in-house counsel for the Karuk tribe. I know that they have been involved in community development for tribal nonprofits. They have their own community development corporation. When I was there, I was charged with building their first in-house counsel legal department and also their gaming facility. And so I got to work on a variety of projects, from new market tax credits to low income tax credits.
Did you stop by?
Prior to Karuk, I was in-house
Are you
counsel
limping?
No.
for the Colorado River Indian
You're
tribes.
supposed to be wearing
I think I took,
The voice might not have it on mute.
yeah. I think I did. So.
Sorry, I was happens to me all the time. I was Deputy Attorney General for the Colorado River Indian tribes in California and Arizona, and I worked on a variety of economic development issues there. They have a very large tribal farming enterprise. I got introduced to tribal ag operations. And then before that, I was a commercial litigator in the Philly area, suing people over breaches of contract. And before that, I went to law school at Berkeley. So at NCAI, like Jackson mentioned, I work on a lot of economic development issues. And this year, for NCAI and nearly everyone else, our entire advocacy has centered around COVID relief negotiations. And I would really like to thank NCN because in early March, we formed 3 working groups that consisted of hundreds of individuals and tribal partners from NAFOA to NACA to NCN. And we had to, within a 2-week period, come up with tribal priorities for what became a $2 trillion bill. And that process was incredibly difficult, many late nights negotiating amongst tribal partners, because everyone had a different interest. And Jackson was, along for the entire ride. When I would turn around edits on joint letters at like 11 o'clock at night, he would review it. He helped draft all of the legislative texts that related to Native CDFI needs, and that partnership and that ability to just return feedback so quickly enabled us to ensure that Native CDFI needs were prominently a part of our 5 main goals going into the CARES Act. And it was that consensus and unity in Indian country, which did get tribes direct relief, and also got them aid in a variety of different matters. The implementation of the CARES Act was not what any of us would have wanted, but I wanted to point out, the power of that unity, because that's what we all did from our homes in like a 2-week period, and that's what we've been trying to do. Congress sluggish pace again. So I just wanted to say a very deep thank you. And also I think it educated a lot of the individuals in those working groups about the importance of Native CDFIs and also the opportunities that could arise with Native CDFIs and the use of the Coronavirus Relief Fund money, which I do know that some tribes have passed their CRF money onto Native CDFIs to distribute to individuals for various purposes. So that those interactions were both advocacy, but also educating folks. And so it was a very exciting and exhausting time. So where are we at with COVID negotiations? It's since the CARES Act passed and Congress turned to the HEROES Act, it's basically been like an unhinged seesaw. There's been weeks in which there was a likelihood that a next package would pass. whether it was heroes or some version of that. You know, over the summer, we had the HEALS Act and we had the Slim Down HEALS Act. We have the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a bipartisan caucus that has been trying to trim down both the HEALS Act and the HEROES Act to try to come to some consensus. And in each time when it seems like those negotiations are getting over the line, they continuously fall apart. What's been particularly unique about these negotiations is that they're not a bicameral negotiation between the House and the Senate. They've been largely negotiations between Speaker Pelosi, Senator Schumer, and then the White House directly. And within the White House, the lead has really been Secretary Mnuchin, and then former Representative Mark Meadows has also been a key part of those negotiations. And it does seem that the White House has wanted a relief package. What exactly that entails has often been in fluctuation. I'm sure that you all saw this week with the release of the revised HEROES Act, there was a really good chance that we were going to see a final agreement between the White House and Speaker Pelosi. And McConnell's position has been over the summer months, and mostly after the HEALS Act fell apart and didn't pass the Senate, that he would look to the White House for what they found to be acceptable. And that really was how the CARES Act too was passed. It was largely a negotiation between the House and the White House. So there was a good chance that was going to happen. Unfortunately, once again, those negotiations fell apart. The House yesterday did pass the revised HEROES Act. The specific bill number is HR 925. It's a $2.2 trillion bill. It was passed on a 214 to 207 vote. It garnered no GOP support. And the Secretary Mnuchin did send over subsequent documents for Speaker Pelosi to look at for further negotiations. The difficulty is that the House is, they're still in session today, and they're holding some hearings, and they're going to have 2 more votes, but they're scheduled to go on recess until after the November elections. Speaker Pelosi has said that if there was an opening and it did look like the White House and her office could come to a final agreement, she might end that recess. But right now, with the election coming up, it looks like that they're not likely to agree to anything, especially since the House did pass the revised HEROES Act, because they were holding off on a floor vote on that while negotiations were still happening. And with negotiations again falling apart, it doesn't look like we're going to see anything before the elections. That being said, today's news with the president having COVID, who knows what effect that has. Maybe he becomes incredibly interested in a relief bill. We don't know. And it's kind of been the state of affairs since the CARES Act passed. It's almost like a day by day. And so the best that tribal advocates can do is to ensure that they're continuing to communicate their tribal priorities to both leadership in the Senate, in the House, which is what we have been doing, and then also to advocate for the tribal provisions of the revised HEROES Act, which is really the base negotiation document. So that's kind of where the state of COVID negotiations is right now. So just wanted to pause before I go into non-COVID discussions in case anybody has any questions on that.
Yeah, if you have a question, let's try the raise the hand or raise the blue hand in the chat box, and then I'll call on you. But I guess while anybody gets ready for that, I think you know this, but I think it's worth just reiterating that the number one priority for native CDFIs and the native CDFI network in particular is an increase in funding for the Native American CDFI Assistance Program Fund. And the Heroes, this smaller Heroes Act had $1 billion for the CDFI fund more broadly, and then 25 million that was set aside for native CDFIs. And I think while we don't think that's proportional and really not as much as the need, we do think that is a good thing, and that still would be our number one priority. And just to reiterate that. Cool. So we've got a quick question from Dave Castillo, and he's from Native Community Capital, and he's out of Tempe, but they also operate in New Mexico. Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Jackson. Thanks for identifying right off the top, NCN's top policy priority, which is NACA. Appreciate that. Fatima, and with regard to NCAI, I think the thing that I've been concerned about and want to make sure that we're coordinating on, and it sounds like we are, there's good working relationships, but NCAI's policy priorities relative to, let's say, NFOA's, and, NIGA and whoever else, holds sway up there in DC, how we coordinate that. Obviously, NCN is very focused on, building tribal economies via native CDFIs, our small business lending, and for some of us, our mortgage lending business, and consumer lending as well. But how do you see that kind of coming together? Obviously, we've got Intertribal Council of Arizona down here, as well as the All Public Governors Council that we work through. But is there any direction that you could provide us on the ground out here as we work with tribal leadership and with the tribes that we work with directly, or through the intertribal organizations, and then generally kind of how that works out itself out with regard to the national Native organizations? Thanks.
Sure. So in terms of priorities for the next package, and we've just been calling it the next package because it keeps on getting redescribed as C4, C5. So the last interorganizational letter that we put forward on economic development and employment needs, we had a category for native CDFI needs. We had a category for small business development, and that section was largely led by NACA. But we also had a section for native CDFI, and that was signed on to, I want to say, by NCAI ED. I'd have to double check if NFOA signed on, but it was multiple tribal organizations. And that letter then became the base for our next package advocacy. And a lot of the content in that letter was picked up for the tribal provisions in the HEROES Act. So the increase to the CRF, the CDFI language, the Speaker's office was drawing a lot from those letters because we also provide legislative text. And to ensure consistency in our policy advocacy, we always go back to that base letter, which has also been endorsed by the House Native Caucus. They endorsed a bunch of tribal policy priorities. And we linked all of our prior letters to kind of get them to wholesale endorse a bunch of asks. And that's why the HEROES Act, even though they slimmed it down considerably, they slimmed down the tribal CRF from 20 billion to 9.5. They still retained that same ask for native CDFIs in terms of the increase to the NACA program, because it has been kept front and center at the DC level. At the tribal level, I think it would be really helpful if member offices, so in whatever state you're from, Montana, Arizona, et cetera, if tribal leaders and also native CDFIs and any individual who's a constituent continues to either call or email their respective members expressing that an increase to NACA funding continues to be a priority, that it's urgently needed as emergency relief, that not only tribal economies are in distress, but the businesses that comprise tribal economies, the individuals that are part of those economies, and the central role that NACA plays, because we continue to keep that message at the leadership level in DC, because we know that that's where the drafting is coming from and the direction to the committees of jurisdiction. But I think it's important for your representatives in Congress to consistently hear that, because they're hearing so many different types of tribal asks, and it's what they might speak about is whatever is the current issue of the day, and there's public health needs, education needs with the reopening of schools, but message that we've been trying to consistently hit is that tribes typically have backfilled so many of the unmet needs in education and within healthcare, and their economies going into a recession is having an enormous secondary effect. And so I think that Native CDFIs, you all have a great story to tell, and you also can give examples of the type of service that you all have provided. I've actually mentioned to Jackson that I have watched a lot of the Friday calls and pulled stories of how CDFIs are adjusting to COVID and their needs as examples when I'm having conversations with Hill staff. So that's what I would recommend in terms of additional advocacy at the constituent level.
Thank you. That's really great. Appreciate that. Thanks.
Cool. Well, thanks, Fatima. And another thing we wanted to talk about, and we've been talking about for a few weeks now, is how can NCN position ourselves so that we're ready for if there is a change in administration, or even if there isn't, that we have a plan moving forward. And I know that NCAI has been active on this, and you have a process for this. And can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. So NCAI has historically, for presidential elections where there's a possibility of a new administration, worked with tribal organizations to develop a presidential transition plan. It's often a very large document, like a 100-page document that covers many different federal departments, and it provides suggestions or recommendations for executive branch action within the first 100 days, and then long-term items that are within the authority of that respective branch. And so NCAI have put forward a presidential transition plan in 2016, and we begun internally to update that presidential transition plan. And just this week, we've begun outreach to different organizations to ask them for input on the various sections that are within their expertise. So example, for child welfare, we would go to NCWA, we would go also to other organizations that work in that area. And we're asking for not only feedback on what we have, and in some of our sections, we've just removed what we had for 2016 because it related more to legislation and not administrative action. But mostly we want to hear from the organizations as experts in various areas what you would like to see in terms of regulatory and administrative improvements based on the barriers that you all have run into, whether it's COVID related or whether it preceded COVID, or maybe it's new barriers that you just realized. We are soliciting feedback through October 14th on those suggestions, excuse me. And then we are going to We're going to put all of that together, and we're going to present that transition document at our annual convention, which is November 9th through November 13th. So it's the second week of November. It's going to be presented in each of the full committees that we have for attendee review, and also discussion and debate in case there's suggestions or edits. And then that document is going to get it's going to get voted on by the entire NCAI Congress at that convention, and that will become the transition document that we put forward to either a new administration. If it remains the Trump administration, we might end up editing aspects of that presidential transition plan, but the goal is to put it through the NCAI Congress so that there's an opportunity for more eyes, more debate, but really the crux of that plan's development comes from the tribal organizations, because there's so much expertise that's built up within the organizations. So that's the presidential transition plan broadly, and I can read off some of the topics that it's going to cover. So we have.
Can you remind us the deadline, the date you
Oh,
think
sure.
by? Yeah.
Yes, October 14th is the deadline for the organizations to provide feedback on. And in terms of the process, I received the document this week for public distribution. So I am going to send the document to Jackson, and I can cut the specific sections that NCN might be interested in commenting on. We have a variety of sections like taxation, economic development, but I don't want to just put you into those categories if you're also interested in commenting on some other areas like agriculture. So I can send the table of contents to Jackson and just tell me which sections you'd be interested in commenting on, and then I'll send you the specific Word documents to provide feedback in regards to those sections. And then we collect all of that information and we reassemble it into the transition document that then goes up for public review at our annual convention.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you. And then, yeah, can you, are there any questions about that? I don't see any, but we'll pause one more time. And then, yeah, finally, so you have an annual meeting coming up, and so that's going to be all online, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yes. So that's going to be November 9th to November 13th. It's the second week of November. It's uniquely after the elections. We may not know what the result of the elections are by the second week of November. So it will be a very interesting time to convene Indian country. It will be virtual. We have outside consultants, and I don't have an answer on the platform, if it's going to be Zoom or some other virtual platform, but it will be virtual, and it will have the same functionalities that we have at our in-person convention, because a lot of our task forces meet, and then we have the full committees and the subcommittees that meet to debate resolutions that are put forward. And as you all know, those who have attended, there's a lot of interactivity within our committees. When a resolution is put forward, the attendees review it. Sometimes they suggest edits, and then it gets voted on within the subcommittee, the full committee, then it goes to the General Assembly floor, and it can still get edited at that state. So the virtual platform that we will have those capabilities to have those types of discussions, and to be able to edit documents in real time based on the attendee feedback. The central function of our convention is the passage of resolutions, which sets forth policy broadly for NCAI going into the next year. Our resolution process just opened up today. The deadline for submission of resolutions is October 19th for timely resolutions, and then the second day of convention, which is November 10th, for resolutions that are emergency in nature and national in scope. And I'll forward the resolution information to Jackson that has like the template and the form for submission of resolutions. We are anticipating receipt of a lot of resolutions addressing a lot of the regulatory barriers that have come to light in regards to COVID relief, because while they might have related to access to CARES Act funding, whether it's PPP or the Main Street Lending Program, what it revealed is the barriers that tribes, tribal organizations, Native CDFIs encounter within the programs they operate in, and then also when there's an influx of stimulus money that's provided. And that's particularly important to keep the spotlight on those regulatory barriers, because it's really hard to capture the attention of legislators on regulatory matters when they're so focused on just emergency appropriations. Just inject cash into programs. But if you're injecting cash into like the PPP and tribal Native CDFIs are having difficulty accessing PPP, then the intended recipients aren't being able to access that funding. And we can anticipate that there will be some type of relief or either more of a recovery bill in the 117th Congress. And so these issues that you all have run into and that other folks have run into, we want to keep them front and center, and we're hoping to see resolutions that really lay out those regulatory issues. NCAI has been in partnership with NCN on sending letters regarding the PPP issues that Native CDFIs have run into, and we based our authority to send those letters based on our policy statement, NCAI's policy statement, which provides pretty broad support to take action on a variety of issues that are emergency and relate to tribal sovereignty, advancement of tribal interests. But it would be very helpful for NCI Government Relations Department to have resolutions that specifically address these regulatory issues, because they'll provide us broader authority to work on it. So would encourage folks to consider submitting resolutions to address some of these policy problems that you've run into in regards to COVID, but not just COVID, also related to the chronic underfunding of the NACA program, other programs. This is an issue that many tribal organizations are focused on. They have been focused on, but they've been elevating it in the testimony that has been done before Congress, because the reason why COVID has hit tribal peoples and economies so terribly is because in many ways they were already in a crisis or an emergency because of the chronic underfunding of the trust and treaty responsibilities, and that extends to tribal economies. The deal was not the tribes would forever have distressed economies, and so this issue of underfunding the NACA program, and I know that Jackson spoke to it, the flat funding, is a problem that should be elevated. And so I would encourage you all to really think about the issues that you all have been confronting and potentially put that forward in a resolution, because that then becomes priorities at the national and NCAI level also for next year.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Fatima. And I think we will follow up on that. Obviously, our priority is increased funding for native CDFIs that are doing this work in our communities. And then through that, I think, there are some regulatory fixes that can be a little easier. We'll follow up on. I want to open it up to see if anybody from our audience and our members and our friends and allies, if you have any comments, questions, concerns for Fatima.
Jackson, I have a question.
Yep. Okay, from Joanna Donahoe. Yep. Hey, Joanna.
Hi, Fatima.
Hey,
This is
Joanna.
I'm Joanna Donahoe. I'm with the Seven Sisters, and I work with Tawny Brunch, who's also on the line from Lakota Funds with the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition. And my question is, thank you for explaining all of the processes. And I just wanted to just check in with you also about NCAI's process this year for compiling recommendations for your budget book for appropriations recommendations. I know that seems like it's a gazillion years off because there's so many steps that have to happen before that this year, but I know you mentioned there's some staffing shifts and things like that, but what will that budget process look like this year for your NCAI's budget book?
That's a great question, because we are very much in discussion about that, because typically our budget task force convenes after our convention, and it's my understanding, and I only went through the process last year for the first time, is that it's often consisted of an invite to organizations to make appropriation suggestions, and then those get incorporated into the budget book that we then work on in December through January. We're, based on feedback from the Hill, we've decided that on the budget book, we're going to reorganize it based on the committees of jurisdiction. Right now it's organized around the issues, and so when Hill staff are looking to inform their budget formulations, they're going through our budget book, and it's difficult sometimes for them to figure out like what's within their jurisdiction. So we're going to reorganize it based on that feedback. But internally, and this is still at the discussion stage, we've heard a lot of feedback that Indian country's been basing their budget in like our Indian country budget book is often based on prior asks and like plus ups to those prior asks, but because the prior asks are based on an undercount of what the actual unmet need is in a program, the base numbers are just incredibly low, and so the plus ups are insufficient, and we definitely saw that for COVID, because initially the discussions were about increasing emergency appropriations based on prior appropriations. And that happened for certain of the programs that are part of the CARES Act versus other programs like the CRF. We completely did not go off of any prior appropriations. And so I say all of that to say that we are trying to figure out how that task force can convene in a public setting to get greater input, in addition to still having the orgs as partners to submit recommendations. Concurrently, the Tribal Interior Budget Council, and this is more focused on Interior, has been pressing Interior on to do a study on tribal unmet needs, and those unmet needs would also involve economic development related needs, but we're also pressing for that analysis to be done through other departments too. And I know that I think there might be better data for native CDFI needs, but we are definitely open to feedback on how the budget book process and our budget task force process would be, could be better, and what would be helpful for other folks. So it's in discussion stage, but it will convene sometime after annual, because appropriations resolutions don't get passed at our annual convention because we don't want to set in stone our appropriation ask when we're setting the policy ask. The appropriation ask might need to be more flexible. So I hope that provides some answer to your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know that NCN and the National American Indian Housing Council and the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition have been working over the past few years to support your efforts on, especially with regard to homeownership and housing recommendations in the appropriations arena. So thank you.
We really do appreciate all the data that has been collected by the various organizations, because we constantly receive requests for data in our Hill advocacy, and it's been difficult to get data for tribal CRF asks. But I know that Native CDFI, there's been a study of your needs. So all of that work has been very effective for policy advocacy.
Well, great. If someone has any burning question, we might have time for that. But if not, I think we need to get rolling with our show. So with that,
sorry, I took 40 minutes of your show.
It's okay. It's all good. Thanks for joining us, Fatima. And again, yeah, it's good to have you there working with us, and also it's great to know that you were able to spend time with us and also hear about the funding. Really, the number one is the funding for us, and we'll be engaged on the rest of the process.
Well, thank you all for having me. I look forward to continuing to work with you and seeing those resolutions at our annual convention. So take care.
Great. Thanks, Fatima. All right, cool. All right, great. And with that, we've got a little bit of time. Got some quick news I want to share. Obviously, last week was hopefully a good week for most of our members that applied for NACA awards. 13.8 million of the 16 million in NACA awards went to NCN members. So congratulations. The next steps, we're going to continue to work together and grow the pie. And part of that is a bit of what we'll talk about coming out of our summit. Pete, are you on? You want to give folks an update about the SVC Impact Pitch event earlier this week?
Oh yeah, that was a great event that Jackson and I were able to participate in. We got to hear from, I believe, 6 different entrepreneurs and Native entrepreneurs, and they did a pitch to investors, and it really generated a lot of great, inspirational thoughts on my end for like NCN and even for our organization on hosting, some pitch contests. And so I think it's something that we need to visit with SVC about and see if we can do one for Native CDFIs nationwide and just do a national event. It was really inspirational. I was really thrilled on the expertise that so many of our Native entrepreneurs, presented. And the neat thing about it is a couple of weeks ago, we partnered with Tawny and Christopher Coburn, and that was in September 8th, 9th, and 10th, and we did an entrepreneurial training. And we had some entrepreneurs from Tawny's area, my area, and Christopher's area. And then just so happened that one out of Tawny's group or area up there, he was he presented. And so it was a really neat experience. And NCN was able to present some award money to about $1,000, I think, wasn't it, Jackson, per individual business, and as a sub-grant. So that was really a fun experience.
Yeah, and Indian Collective was also really involved in that, so I want to acknowledge them. I don't think Nikki's on the call, but she was on, and I think she even had some of her family that was involved in the pitch. And I think something that we'd like to replicate is pairing an entrepreneur with an angel investor. And so that was, I think, what was really interesting about this is every entrepreneur had an angel investor who's coaching them a bit on their pitch. So quickly, some of our folks were involved in Prosperity Now Summit. Hey, I'll call in Dave Castillo. You still there? So I think
Yeah.
Dave was on a panel for Prosperity Now. Can you tell us a bit about your panel?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at affordable housing after the pandemic, and we had pre-recorded our panel discussion, and then we did a live Q&A afterwards. I guess they said we had about 100 people in our room, and you know, what's unfortunate is I had the person from the Urban Institute, their stats person or demographics person, compiled a bunch of information, and our friend from the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis was kind enough to share with me some source data for you know, that he relies on, and we weren't able to get that incorporated in the Urban Institute person's presentation, so that was a little unfortunate. But as usual, I kind of made some strong suggestions as to kind of what practitioners might want to do during this time, and I think those were well received. So we had some lenders on the line and whatnot, but yeah, it was a good event. I mean, it was they made good use of the technology, and I don't know how much of a tribal audience we had, but we were definitely well represented, I think, in terms of the recommendations that were offered.
Great. And I think Crystal Langholtz from OISTA was on a different panel. Then I joined one with Patrice Kunesh, formerly of the Federal Reserve, and Randy Akey, and Sharon Vogel from the Cheyenne River Housing. And so that was, I think, a great little panel, and reaching out to other folks that otherwise we were not engaged with. So I thought that was good. And sharing a bit of announcements. We talked about this last week, and we sent out a link, but we want folks to put their name in for the 3 NCN committees: data and impact, organizational development, and policy. And our board is going to review the applications, and we really want folks that are interested, 1, and 2, have the time and want to be engaged. So I think there's a lot going on here. And here's just what it would look like when you get in. Our friends from the Catholic Campaign for Human Development have a grant that's open right now, and we wanted to share that. I think the kind of pre-opening just happened a couple weeks ago. And NeighborWorks, our friends at NeighborWorks, also have an opportunity. We wanted to share their Achieving Excellence program, and the deadline for this has been extended to October 15th. You want to say anything, Pete?
Jackson, yeah, the NeighborWorks program, I participated in that last year, and I would highly recommend anyone to apply for it because it was like a most unbelievable experience. It was an 18-month cohort training, and 3 of the trainings happened at Harvard for a week, and then the network that you're connected to. I was maybe one of 2 people there that represented Indian country. But it was so many networks outside of Indian country that I'm still utilizing and helping today, and they're helping me. So it's a lifetime network. Our group still connects daily with questions back and forth. So I would apply if I had not gone before. I strongly encourage you to.
Cool. Great. Cool. And I want to pause if any of our members have any announcements you want to share or things you want to get out so people are aware. All right. Going once, twice, gone. All right. Cool. So we wanted to give some quick update about our summit. Thanks to everybody who joined us. Thank you to our sponsors. We got a few of them on. NeighborWorks. I think NeighborWorks is on, and we got Northwest Area Foundation helped us make it happen. Paul Hogert from Common Goals. So I think, I don't know if we have anybody from Wells Fargo, but they also helped us. And Clearinghouse, CDFI. So thanks to everybody who helped make that happen, and thanks for all our members. And hopefully you were able to get one of these cups. If not, and you attended, shoot me a note and we'll make sure you get one.
Dave Tubby is advertising for a loan officer, but You can't
Yeah.
steal any of mine.
I just saw that. Yeah, I just saw that. Sorry, Dave. Yeah, I should have.
The whole
Thanks for pointing
Northwest
that
is,
out, Ted. What's
the
that?
whole Northwest is cutting me off. I can't recruit or steal talent from anybody, so.
Yeah, and I think Tolifan was hiring for one earlier. So
Yeah,
Natalie.
Yeah.
So it's an in-demand position. Cool. So yeah, if you didn't get a box and you attended the summit, let me know. We'll make sure we get you one. I want to give you a hat tip to Pete. Pete had a bunch of good ideas, and one of them was make sure everybody gets their coffee mug, because we want to be with you every day. So here are some of our speakers.
I'm gonna take you hunting on my moose trip. How's that? My moose hunting trip.
Yeah,
I'll go for that.
Yeah,
That'd be a good time.
yeah.
I'll send you pictures of your mug by my campfire.
All
Or
right.
by the moose. Do it by the
And
moose.
by the moose.
Yeah.
Everybody, yeah, please get on our committees, because especially the policy committee, we've got a fun or a real opportunity. We're going to partner with Marshall Gans from Harvard, and is going to lead a cohort of kind of re-establishing our message. And you were going to get to that, Jackson. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah.
Perfect timing. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Jackson, I'm going to let you take it away there.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Just going through some quick highlights, and hopefully folks were able to listen to Marshall Gans. We thought it'd be great to bring a different voice to the conversation, and also a voice that works on organizing and making change in a different way. And so we've talked to him about organizing a native CDFI cohort. We wanted to see how many of our members would be interested in something like that. It would, and also a format of how that could happen. And so right now, I think we launched a poll to see if folks would be interested in meeting in person, whether for something like a cohort or a regional meeting. And obviously, there are a whole lot of unknowns, but I think something like this will help us gauge whether we do plan for any events or not this coming year in person. And then while you go through that, also Deb Holland, I'm really happy she was able to join us. I think there was a whole lot from what she had to say, but I really aligned with what Marshall Gans said, that native CDFIs were powerful. We have a great story to tell, and we need to tell it, and we need to tell it in Congress and everywhere we go. So that was really great. And we finished off with Dr. Sarah Kostelik, and she works with the Native National Indian Child Welfare Association, and they work directly with social workers who really have challenging jobs right now, I'm sure. And she helps them on multiple levels, but she shared a bit of their philosophy about self-healing and healing Native healers. So, Pete, do you have anything before I wrap up the poll?
No, no, I think, just getting, again, everybody get on that policy committee, organizational development committee. We really have a lot of exciting things happening at NCN, thanks to Jackson's leadership and kind of taking us through 2019 and 2020, and getting into 21. There's just a lot of exciting things going, and the work never ends. And what I'm doing is begging you to help us share the workload, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done when it comes to policy. So please put your name in.
Pete, this is Pete. I have a quick question on the policy committee thing. Sorry, Jackson, I didn't mean to ruin the.
No worries.
Just really quickly, Pete, if we, I know my sense of the nominations on your website are for Native CDFI members, but what role, if any, would you be interested in from associate members like Seven Sisters who might be willing to volunteer time to be on the policy committee? Like, how do we, are you guys, are you, at this point, are you limiting the membership in each of your committees to voting members, or is there a role for associate members?
That's a great question, Joanna. We need to rethink that a little bit, because I think the voice from our supporters that aren't, native CDFIs is huge. So let me and Jackson visit, and then can we get back to you on
Of
that?
course. Yeah,
Okay.
of course. Yeah, no, I mean, and just to be clear, it's on a volunteer basis. So, but I understand the value of having the native CDFI voices loud and clear.
Yeah.
So just let us, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Good. That's a good question, Joanna. So I think for right now, can anybody who's interested just sign up, and we're gonna work out a way to make it all work. So cool. And I think Dave Castillo has his hand raised. Dave.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, the gal from NCAI gave us a great overview of kind of their process and their time frame. What's our process and our time frame? Because we're operating based on the 2019 priorities, and obviously those need to get trued up. So how does that work?
Yeah, and the time frame's coming up really quick. I'll get the ball rolling on the kind of the easy things like NACA and some of the policy changes that they want before, I guess, by October 14th and October 19th. But after that, yeah, we're going to need to get together.
Hey, and then, yesterday me and Dave had a nice long call, but and really the whole idea behind this regionalization, don't take it wrong that we're going to regionalize, but what we want is to hear the voices from the Southwest, to hear the voices from the Northwest, so that everybody feels like they have a say in policy, and it's not just being driven, by one or two people. We really want input coming from every region, and that was the concept kind of behind the regionalization. So we'll get that rolled out quickly, and so that we can hopefully have our first meetings by the end of October, and we got to roll quickly on it.
Yeah. And with that, speaking of meetings, so here are the poll results really quickly. Looks like the biggest number of folks are in Q2 2021, and the second biggest are in the fourth quarter. So all right, so that's really helpful. Yeah, we'll be in touch a bit more about the cohort as we work it out with Marshall Gans and his team. But the idea is that the cohort we'd be able to bring together interested and committed native CDFIs who want to build upon their leadership foundation and continue to grow, and also use this as an opportunity to help us organize for some of our shared values and goals. And obviously that's increasing capital for native CDFIs. And they have a few different trainers, and we'd be able to break out into small groups, kind of like a lot of cohorts. And so I think the reviews have been really, really great. The folks that have gone through it. So we're really looking forward to that. And with that, I want to open it up to additional thoughts and questions, because I think we're right at the end of we're right on top of the hour. Well, so next week, we're going to have the opportunity. I didn't highlight them, but the Opportunity Finance Network has worked with us to create a native CDFI online community. And we're going to have one of their folks come and join us, walk us through how to utilize that online community. So that's one of our guests for next week. And looking forward to continue moving forward. I encourage everybody to sign up, put your name in the hat for the committees sooner rather than later. And I think our goal will be to, when we meet back up next week, to have a bit more of these process questions that our members have raised answered. Yeah. And I think with that, Pete, do you have any final words to take us out?
No, just everybody stay safe, and Ted, be safe hunting that moose.
Yeah.
We'll hopefully see you next week. Thank you.
Yeah. And post a picture.
Yeah.
With the cup. All right. Thanks, everybody.